It's time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. A former coordinating minister of the economy and minister of finance, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, says she worked hard to open up information and tackle corruption, saving billions of dollars that were channeled to other priorities when she served under the administration of former President Olusegun Obasanjo and Goodluck Jonathan. Dr. Okonjo-Iweala, a former World Bank Managing Director who is Nigeria's nominee for the post of World Trade Organization Director General, addressed her stewardship in Nigeria on how to fight graft in a write-up entitled "To Beat COVID-19, Governments Need to Open Up," published on Bloomberg. She advised governments across the world to be more transparent and accountable amid COVID-19 pandemic. The former minister noted that many countries are battling corruption in the procurement of medical supplies, including personal protective equipment, adding that governments should publish all tenders and all contracts, and all companies receiving funds should not be anonymous. She said during her 2 tenures as Nigeria finance ministers from 2003 to 2006, as well as from 2011 to 2015, she introduced reforms that helped to curb corruption. Tundun, your take on this.
While she's selling herself and doing it really well, she does have to brandish her own credentials, and she does have that sterling track record behind her. But I'm interested in what she said about the procurement scandals that are going on around the world. You would have noticed this trend of health ministers resigning willy-nilly. Very few times is it the case of them disagreeing on the scientific or medical procedures. It's usually about procurement and self-enrichment during a pandemic that is devastating people. Some people are using it as an avenue to get rich. And it's not an African phenomenon. Even in the UK recently, there has been a bit of a storm in a teacup about that. And so I'm very interested in the fact that she raised that, and it's important that she did.
Yeah, Dr. Abati?
Well, you recall that after she left office as Minister of Finance the first time, she did a book, Reforming the Unreformable. And the whole point of that book is the kind of challenge that any reformer within the public service, within a system like Nigeria, is likely to face. Because for many years, there have been challenges in terms of transparency, in terms of accountability. So she wrote this piece in Bloomberg, titled "To Beat COVID-19, Time for Governments to Open Up." And she has been very consistent in terms of what she's been saying about leadership, about accountability, about openness, and that if COVID-19 has reiterated anything again and again, it is the fact that our procurement processes need to be more open. The kind of corruption that Tundun was referring to that has been reported widely happens because there is no open tender. Some of the officials, government officials, seeing that we have an emergency, they don't just bother to do any open tender. They do procurement under the table. And she's more or less saying that that cannot be an excuse. Government must at all times be open. And it's not just tenders and contracts that have to be published in the open. Also, budgets must also be made open for people who want to raise questions. And you recall that she started this tradition of publishing federal government monthly allocations by putting it out there in the newspapers to indicate this is what your state government has collected this month. And that was a way of empowering Nigerian citizens at that time. Now, we have issues, of course, with procurement in Nigeria. There is the Procurement Act, which a number of people have issues with, which they tend to sidestep. There's also a Procurement Council. I don't know whether that Procurement Council is in place to oversee. And then we have the Bureau for Public Procurement, which gives a certificate of no objection. So the thing to do, along the lines of our suggestions, is to strengthen these institutions and to make sure that they work in our own context, either now or even after COVID-19.
But these institutions work before, because I remember very well about BPE was very active under Nasir El-Rufai, and since El-Rufai left BPE, I've not really heard anything.
That was privatization.
That's a privatization. I refer to BPP.
Yeah.
Okay, BPP. Okay, BPP. Okay.
Yeah, any government contractor needs to get a certificate.
So sorry about that. So sorry about that. But apart from what she said here, she talked about transparency. Would you say we've been transparent enough with the fight against COVID? Because till date, we don't even know how much has been donated You know, those figures are not released. The accounts have not been audited. Doctors on strike in Lagos, a 3-day warning strike. We don't have enough protective equipment, PPE and the likes. So, till today, we have not audited the palliatives during the lockdown. The palliatives shared during the lockdown. So would you say we've been transparent enough in all of this? And those institutions of government you've made mention of, is it time for them to start to look into this and we have an independent audit of what has transpired since the lockdown started?
Well, there's a dimension. Okay, go ahead.
No, carry on.
There is a dimension to it about citizen action. I think that citizens should also be prepared to ask questions. Oftentimes, we assume that this issue of transparency and accountability are textbook concepts, but they are real issues in terms of how the people are governed. And the people must just ask relevant questions. And then, of course, the legislature, that's Parliament, also has a role to play in this regard. Are they asking the right questions? And by this, I mean both the National Assembly and the state houses of assembly, because they have a responsibility to ask that the books be opened up. However, in terms of reporting, I'm aware that the Lagos State government took out 2 pages in the newspapers to list all the donations that have been given to the Lagos State government, either in terms of cash or in kind. And the Central Bank of Nigeria also published a full list of donations. The other time, Tundun was quoting about 27 billion, right?
And there were conflicting figures because she was, I think we had Bekeme on the show, Daddy. Yes. Bekeme was saying, no, it's 47 billion. You said 27 billion. So for discrepancies like that.
We double-checked.
Yes,
Tundun was right.
So why do we even have to have discrepancies like this in figures?
Well, how I explained that day was that the CBN's official statement is what we have to go on. Maybe she's aware of others that have not been reconciled. Maybe her information was up to date, more up to date than the CBN's statement then. But yeah, the CBN did give a statement.
Dr. Abati, I also see a list that shows, apart from the list of donations, a list that shows what the monies have been spent on.
Yes, well, Lagos State, yes, gave an account of what has been done so far. And as I said, look, the relevant departments and citizens should be the ones to ask questions. And it shouldn't just be the Lagos State government or the CBN giving account. It should be at all levels. And I hope that at some point, the Presidential Task Force will also render a full account. And I guess part of the accounting process for the Presidential Task Force has to do with, this regular briefing. We hope that we'll get a point where, contracts, tenders, and all of that will be properly accounted for.
It's really important.
It's really important we do that. We'll see how this goes in the coming days. That's all on News Headlines. We'll take a short break now. When we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Michael, and Aaron Akirjola to give us updates on Africa and global business and COVID-19. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Joining us now is Rotus Odiri with Africa Business Update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Tundun. Good morning, Rufai.
Morning, Rotus.
We start off with a circular that was released yesterday from the Central Bank of Nigeria with regards to maize imports. The circular, as you can see up there, says that as part of the efforts by the Central Bank to increase local production, stimulate a rapid economic recovery, safeguard rural livelihoods, and increase jobs which were lost as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, authorized dealers are hereby directed to discontinue the processing of Form M for the importation of maize corn with immediate effect. If you already have one of these forms being processed, you have until the close of business of July the 15th, which is tomorrow, to complete that. We've talked about the window where importers can approach the central bank. That was, of course, the exchange rate was moved from 360 to 380. You need to have a Form M and letters of credit to show you have legitimate demand for a foreign exchange before you can bring, you can import your raw materials. So with regards to this, well, the central bank is saying, of course, that this is the reason why they are discontinuing this with immediate effect. But let's look at the impact. We have a chart up here. Animal feed makes up 60% of the demand for maize and corn. And as you can see here, corn is in the blue and the chart, sorghum is in orange, wheat is in gray. for the last 10 years, 2009 through to 2019, corn has been the biggest subject of demand. According to the Foreign Agricultural Service, which is a division of the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, we imported about 400 metric tons of maize corn, exported about 100. With regards to production, we produced about 10.5 million metric tons. We've consumed about 10.7. In 2 years prior, that was about 11.3. So we do consume more than we produce, but we are catching up with regards to production, and perhaps that's the reason why, part of the reason why the central bank is saying that this is something that needs to be cut off with regards to access to FX. But there might be an impact because of the demand. The production part of animal feed is expensive because of infrastructure challenges and so on and so forth. So hopefully we don't see a spike in price, because even though our production is increasing, we're still importing quite a bit of corn and maize. Corn maize is not just for us to eat. This is also an input for other items as a raw material. So it is very, very much in demand in the country. And again, with the central bank closing this window, it is hoped that we won't see a movement in price. We shouldn't, because again, our production is slowly catching up, but there's still a bit of a ways to go. So that's the circular that was just released yesterday. Moving on to unemployment. It's something that we've talked about on the show. It's something that Nigerians keep talking about, as far as the country is concerned. The amount of youth that are without jobs, the demand for jobs, and the lack of data. So Zainab Ahmed, again, at the discussion that she had yesterday on the medium-term expenditure framework, the virtual consultation, she did say, actually, that we are going to be getting an unemployment report by the end of July. So I'm pleased to announce that by the end of July 2020, we'll have the newest, that's NBS, the National Bureau of Statistics, unemployment report. Final report is being put together. So that is definitely something to look forward to. Q3 2018 was the last data we got on unemployment. At that time, it was 23%, about 20 million Nigerians that were out of work. And since that time, you have to assume that the numbers have increased. Just to show you the amount of focus on unemployment, if we hop to South Africa, there's a gentleman here. Let's look at a TED Talk from Chris Hart. Chris Hart is an economist and an investment professional. Here he was in 2014 giving a TED Talk on stagflation. Stagflation is a situation in an economy where you have rising inflation, rising unemployment, and stagnant demand. That is, GDP growth is actually pretty slow. So we actually had him about a couple weeks ago on the Global Business Report. So here he is, he was talking to me about unemployment in South Africa. We actually set up that graphic and put it up while he was speaking. You can see the unemployment numbers in South Africa where they are 30%. If you include people that have stopped looking for work, 39%. This gentleman has consistently hammered on unemployment to be the #1 priority of the South African government. He almost talks about nothing else. It's jobs, 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 jobs. So if we look at the kind of emphasis that he has put on the need to have proper data to, I mean, they already have their data, so they already know what the situation is. So he is just talking about having to create more jobs. Here in Nigeria, we don't have the data. We don't know. So the thing is, it's commendable that the finance minister has made this promise that we will be getting these updated figures, and I personally am dying to see what those numbers are, because that way you can plan your policy accordingly when you know what the deficit is. How many jobs have we lost in Nigeria due to COVID-19? Nobody knows. I mean, how many jobs have we lost in 2019? What's the cumulative number? You can plan your policy accordingly when you have the hard numbers and the hard data to tell you what it is that you are looking for. So end of July, I'll be looking forward to those figures to see where we are as far as unemployment is concerned. And then finally, Coronation Asset Management released a report just yesterday looking at the navigating the capital markets, the investor's dilemma. I have consistently talked about this dilemma time and time again with regards to where inflation is and our real rates of return. Constantly talking about it. They have a chart here, T-bills versus inflation. Over the last 10 years, surprisingly, Treasury bills, government treasury bills have, up until this last year, they've outperformed inflation. So if you held treasury bills since 2009 up until now, you've beaten inflation by an average of about 257 basis points, about 2.57. So you've got a real rate of return of 2.57. It wasn't until just recently that rates crashed to where they are in abysmal levels and you have a negative real return. Again, for those that are wondering, if you want to calculate your real rates of return, you simply take your return that you're getting on your investment, whether it's a savings account, treasury bill, and subtract inflation from it. So inflation right now is at 12.4%. So let's take a look at another chart where we're talking about this Naira fair value for the Naira. So they're looking at the Naira fair value risk-free return. What they did was they said, okay, look, what do you want to target? Do you want to target inflation or do you want to target long-term devaluation? So they said over a 10-year period, if you want to be able to beat the effect of long-term devaluation on your purchasing power, the rates to look at, according to their calculations, is 9.2% per annum. They then added the average US dollar bond return offered by Nigeria, which was about 5.5%. They came out to 14.7%. So anyone reading that report, if anybody wants to have a figure in their head as to the figure that should be beating inflation or beating long-term dollar devaluation, it should be that 14% figure. Mind you, inflation is still climbing. We're expecting to get inflation for June this week, I believe, from the Bureau of Statistics.
Thank you, Rotus.
So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rotus.
Right. And now for a global business update, we're joined by Michael Wilson from London. Good morning, Mr. Wilson.
Good morning.
Good morning. Chinese shares, first of all, yes, as Rotus was saying, we search for all these signposts, don't we? And it's very, very difficult to navigate when nobody really knows what's going on. However, there are some major things happening. Investors in China have actually taken their money off the table after the bull run that they've had. So the Chinese index down about 1% during its trading day. And those renewed lockdown measures obviously impacting quite heavily on Hong Kong. Look at this trade data from China. Imports were 2.7%. Now, it doesn't sound a lot, does it? Except that economists were expecting minus 10%. And the May reading was minus 16.7%. Exports came in at 0.5%. The consensus was minus 1.5%. So you can see there's been quite a rebound. Does that say something about the global economy? Maybe it does. Adding to broad market concerns, rising tensions between the United States and China. Washington yesterday rejected China's disputed claims to offshore resources in the South China Sea, and China announced sanctions against the United States. This kind of tit-for-tat stuff going on over the US sanctions over alleged human rights abuses in the Uyghur Muslim minority, which you will have heard about. Yesterday, there was this sense of optimism I was talking about yesterday. Let's go to the markets in general. And the FDA, the Federal Drug Authority in the United States, has actually tracked a couple of drugs, fast-tracked a couple of drugs that will help. They have some potential to be COVID-19 vaccines. Pfizer and BioNTech are working on 4 drugs that are hoping to come up with some kind of vaccine possibilities. And BioNTech was saying that it could get approval for some of this by as early as Christmas. So, again, a bit of optimism there. European shares closed higher and US stocks got off to a good start on the back of that news. Plus, do you remember me telling you yesterday, and again, we touched on this a few weeks ago, that remdesivir, this is the antiviral drug which is produced by Gilead. Now, it's not a cure, nor is this a vaccine, but what it tends to do is protect people suffering from coronavirus from actually dying, which is a good thought. But many countries are still battling. Obviously, infection rates are up. Number of new cases grew in Florida just yesterday by 4.7%. The average, the 7-day average is 4.4%. Somebody from the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States, a chap called Robert Kaplan from Dallas, he said there were concerns about the infection rate, but at the same time, he said it may be necessary to add a bit more fiscal help to the economy, but as soon as a recovery began to be seen to be happening, and let's hope it does, then that money should be withdrawn fairly quickly. The NASDAQ, look at this, another record yesterday. The other index is down about 2%, but Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Facebook, Google, and Alphabet are all set all-time highs. Generally speaking, other things finished lower. Now, the big one today, and this will be a theme for the whole week, I touched on this yesterday, is the US earnings season, which begins, and it's the banks, it's JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Citigroup today. As I told you yesterday, and it's come out again today, the major banks have collectively put in $25 billion to help against bad debts and so on, and there's a feeling that those will surge as the pandemic as the pandemic plays itself out, if indeed it does. Total bad debt provision, listen to this, could be as much as $700 billion. That is quite a lot of money. As far as the UK is concerned, the FTSE opening lower, but that may change today. Who knows? It's very difficult to tell. But good retail sales here, pent-up demand, obviously, because of the coronavirus. The economy, though, shrank by 19% over the first 3 weeks of the year. The second 3 weeks of the year. Now, you would expect that to happen in lots of ways, given the lockdown and so on. But it grew very, very slightly in May, 1.8%, but overall it's a drop just as expected. And finally, let's touch on commodities. Slide in the US dollar has helped gold, just like it did yesterday. We were talking a little bit about OPEC with the good doctor yesterday, and my feeling was that there would be production cuts. Apparently, I'm wrong. According to majority of people, they're thinking that maybe the OPEC will taper off the steep production cuts, which will help oil. Copper is doing extremely well. You've got gold there. I would, if I were you, keep an eye on other non-ferrous metals as well. Something is stirring somewhere. I'm not quite sure what it is, but something is stirring, and it might be that those commodities, as soon as they start to rise, they tend to be a fairly good barometer of industrial production actually picking up. Who knows? It might be happening tomorrow. Maybe I'll have a bigger smile on my face tomorrow. That's your global roundup.
Thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Thank you very much, Michael. We'll see you tomorrow. Now for an update on COVID-19 pandemic, Aaron Akrejola is here with us. Good morning, Aaron. Aaron, good morning. Are you with us?
Yes, I'm with you, Doctor. Can you hear me?
It's good to see you this morning.
All right, it's good to see you this morning. And let's get straight into the numbers today, looking at how things are playing out in terms of COVID-19 around the world. Looking at the global map, we started off from there. We're beginning to see cities going back into measured lockdowns in some areas. We found out that we've actually crossed the 13 million mark for cases of COVID-19, as right now we stand at 13,106,568. If they can still help us with that particular figure, yes, certainly. The US, right, with still over 3 million cases at the moment. And it's kind of fearful. But yesterday, the WHO had their weekly meeting, and they spoke about the fact that there is no shortcut out of this pandemic, and that we should get used to this new normal, as life might not return to the old normal anytime soon, which is quite frightening. And you look at that and you say that for those who have taken COVID-19 with kid gloves, several people think it is sparse. Some are saying that the COVID-19 has actually abated. The WHO are warning that it is still on the rise, and the UK are actually preparing for the peak of the first wave as they move into the second. And they're also preparing sometime in August, September for the second wave. So things are still really going out of hand at the moment, spiraling out of control in terms of COVID-19. So let's see how things actually go there. But before we go there, let's actually say that the WHO has been speaking. Also, the UN have been speaking. Right now, as it stands, the UN said that in 2019, close to about 687 million people were in hunger around the world, and that a further 130 million can be added to the already 687 million people who are suffering from hunger around the world due to COVID-19, which is kind of fearful, understanding that at the moment, 381 million people are affected by this when you look at how things are actually playing out in some part of the world. In Africa, we are suffering, about 250 million people are suffering from hunger, and that might just increase to about an extra 40 million, no thanks to the pandemic and what it has brought our way in the recent months and what is looking like in the future, because things are not looking steady at all, and the way governments have been handling it have not helped matters. And the WHO has also been speaking and advising government that leadership should be key, because if you look at the top 5 in terms of infection rates in the world, there are question marks about the leadership and the direction of leadership in terms of handling COVID-19, from the US to the UK to India to Brazil and other countries. You'll find that leadership has come into question time and time again. And they're warning that if the leaders do not brace up, if they do not guard their loins, it will be a difficult time down the line. But maybe a good news that will be coming out today will be in the airline industry, because MIT, a very popular university in the US, the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, have come out with a paper that states that those seats in the middle aisle, that if they are kept vacant, they actually might be able to reduce the amount of infections by as much as half, and which is actually a good news, because at the moment they say that 1 in 4,300 people would actually catch it if they are filled to capacity, and if they leave it in half, those middle seats, if they are left vacant, they actually reduce that number in 1 in 7,700 people. So which is a good thing, with airlines beginning to go the route of filling up all the seats in planes. Hearing this would only reinforce the fact that science, once again, should prevail in making decisions in terms of COVID-19. Because at the moment, airlines are looking to actually shore up their bottom line, make a lot of profit, and they will need to know that they reduce in half the rate of infection if they keep that middle seat very vacant. But for how long they will keep that middle seat vacant is left to be seen. Okay, before I actually go, the Ministry of Health has released a guideline that states some things we need to do and what we don't need to do in terms of public spaces, in terms of travel, in terms of being in marketplaces, in terms of banks and offices. Without a doubt, here in Nigeria, hotels and recreational parks are still closed, and at the moment, I will still say to people that are still in the habit of sneaking into hotels and recreational parks that they might turn to super spreaders if they are not very, very careful. And also people that go out to banks without gainsaying it, people should always insist that anybody that comes close to them in public spaces should always wear some kind of face covering. Regardless of where you are, they should always insist some kind of face covering, because it helps reduce the spread of infections. We are beginning to see people get tired of it. We are beginning to see people go back to their old ways. That should not be. The virus has not passed yet. We are not even hitting the peak at this moment. So we need to begin to reinforce that it should become a new normal by people going out and also wearing face masks and ensuring that they keep safe distance from other people.
I want to take you back to the airplanes, because it's one thing 1 minute and the opposite the next minute. It's really frustrating and just maddening, quite frankly, because according to airlines, I remember the US Airlines, Airbus, Boeing, they were saying that airplanes are safe because air is changed, it's completely renewed every 2 or 3 minutes, that fresh air from outside the cabin comes in through the engine, and they have HEPA filters, which filters out particles, even small particles the size of COVID-19. And now you're saying there's this study, and that contradicts that. I mean, this is the same way that they said that it wasn't airborne for the longest time, and next thing we hear, it is in fact airborne.
Now, to actually answer that question, it's only just simple science, understanding that proximity determines the rate of infection, or the frequency and the ease of infection. If 3 people sit in a row, for example, if somebody sneezes or coughs, remember, people who wear masks going into the airplane, at some point, they will always bring down the mask. What stops somebody from sneezing, coughing, or probably just sending aerosols into the air? Before the airplane mechanism recycles this air, it might have gone into your lungs.
Yes, but I'm telling you, also simple science, to quote you, is what said that there's no need to have certain seats vacant, that is a PR strategy and not a safety strategy. And the science continues to contradict itself. It's really, you don't know what to do.
I'm concerned. I'm just hoping that, the researchers will work more hand in hand with the industry, so that scientific findings can be shared with the relevant stakeholders. Now, only 2 weeks ago, American Airlines announced that it was going to start booking middle seats again. And United Airlines has also said the same thing.
Yes.
And interestingly enough, only yesterday, at the Presidential Task Force briefing in Nigeria, the Minister of Aviation, Adi Sirika, addressed this same problem. And he was saying that, look, it is very safe for all the seats, to be occupied, and that there is no need for middle seats to be vacant. And that, of course, can be confusing to passengers. When I read that statement from him, I said, well, perhaps maybe it would be better to just stay away from air travel for now. But the truth of the matter, of course, is that these airlines are also concerned about their profits.
Yeah, the bottom line.
Profitability, the bottom line. Because if you look at what the Minister of Transportation was saying about rail services in Nigeria, it was all about the bottom line. And he was saying, look, if we reduce the number of passengers, then we'll be losing money. We spend 90 million per month to maintain one particular train. If we reduce the number by half, then you'll be spending more than you are getting back. So I hope all of these considerations are not about profit. Safety should be the priority for stakeholders in the aviation sector.
Because the point is, if there's a major push about social distancing, whether it is 1.5 meters, whether it is 2 meters, when you are seated in a row, that by itself, how do you keep the safe distance? If you say that it is okay for people to sit
I want to take you back to the SARS epidemic. At the time, it was said that people did not catch SARS on the flight, that they caught SARS in the airport. That apparently on the plane, that renewed air and what have you. But like Dr. Abati said, I'm not going to really put my life on the line trying to prove any theory about renewed air. But that's what they said with the SARS pandemic, that the people, because some people said they caught it on a flight and they were told, no, you didn't. You caught it at the airport.
Okay. I mean, the most important thing I want to say here, Aaron, is science is constantly evolving, but we should be very careful. I don't think anybody should put their lives on the line now. This is still up in the air. And especially for the fact, especially for the fact that COVID is airborne. So by breathing, you don't even need to sneeze now. By just breathing out, and you have COVID, you've put it in the air. So anybody can catch it. And we should be very careful. And another part I'd like to talk about, I think we have dropped the ball in the fight against COVID. Nigerians don't observe social distancing any longer. We think like COVID is over. And we don't take precautions. People don't wash their hands as much as they should. Even when they wear their face masks, they put it down. But increasingly, we are seeing a surge in the number of deaths. About 70 deaths now. The hospitals were complaining the other day about oxygen, how much they need oxygen. I think we should rethink our behavior as Nigerians. It looks as though we feel COVID is over. So
now that we hear that there is airborne transmission. Maybe they will have to start enforcing the wearing of face masks, particularly in public places.
Dr. Abati, let me shock you. A lot of Nigerians are not hearing now that COVID is airborne. It's go to the market, it's business as usual.
The point is
I think there's no fear for it again. If I don't want us to live in fear, but maybe if we have that certain level of fear, because I am scared. Go to companies these days.
Rather than
hand sanitizer bottles are not refilled.
Rather than fear, if we live with a certain level of consciousness, it will actually go a long way.
Maybe the fear will bring about the consciousness because it looks as though we've lost the consciousness.
No, usually with fear, what happens is when people get over the fear, they return back to their lifestyle, like we've actually seen with COVID. At some point, people were really scared about it, but right now, when they understand, when people are beginning to question that, have you seen people? How many people do you know that actually has had COVID and the rest of them? They're talking about the vagueness of it. Certainly that will abate at some point. But if there is consciousness, it's always in your mind that you need to do the right thing. Things like washing of hands before you eat. Washing of hands is always required. That consciousness is in the mind already because you know that you might have picked up germs from anywhere and brought it to the food table. So if you have that consciousness, it goes a long way because it helps reinforce a certain kind of lifestyle.
I need to be hermetically sealed. Where can I be hermetically sealed? Because I'm just...
let me just point out let me just point out one correction. Somebody said you do not transmit coronavirus by breathing out. It is transmitted through sneezing and coughing.
Yes.
The droplets that you cough or sneeze that become airborne. So I'm going to put that out there.
No, but then you now have churches being told you cannot sing in church. You have people going down a roller coaster. Don't scream, because if you sing or you scream, then you emit droplets. So there's contradictory.
But once they say something is airborne, as long as you get air out, it could be a deep breath.
In fact, Dr. Akers will
as long as you get air out.
I can't deal with it.
When you are in any enclosed space, you must wear face mask.
Yes.
You know, we may get to a point that even to present this program, we will need to wear face masks.
True.
Yes.
True.
Yes,
because even speaking,
I cannot deal.
Because speaking, sometimes you might not, maybe breathing might be fast stretching it, but speaking, some people do emit droplets while speaking. So certainly speaking, that is why, Doctor, you are very spot on that one, because at a certain point, the essence of social distances is that people talk. Maybe, for example, somebody standing, people are standing in a single file on a line, and somebody is speaking on the phone, and he's maybe he's excited, and while he's speaking, droplets will go into the air.
Aaron.
Oh, okay, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Aaron. So